and welcome to the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight, a production of the Libertarian Party Affiliate Support Committee. Valerie Sarwak, Chair, and of course, the Libertarian National Committee, Joe Bishop, Henchman Chair. As always, we have John Gapso on the big board, and my name is Pat Ford, and I am privileged twice a week to host programs on LPTV. Tonight, we focus on affiliates, the best practices, the legislative affairs, events, activisms, their get out the vote efforts, and of course, the all-important affiliate process. Joining us tonight, again, a newly minted, freshly inaugurated, if you will, the Grand Poobah, the Chief Water Buffalo, the High Exalted Roar. Of course, we're libertarians. It's none of that. But joining me for the very first time is Tony Moen. As again, he's the newly elected state chair of the great state of Wisconsin. Tony, welcome to the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pat, for having me on. It's great to be on.
Absolutely. And first of all, congratulations on your ascension to the chair. And I say that with love and just a little bit of sarcasm because, you know, as you're probably all realizing, ascension probably isn't the quite word, but this is a fun show.
Absolutely.
But so tell us a little bit about yourself. As always, we ask everyone to give us their libertarian moment, but also what other positions have you held, and what roles have you played in Wisconsin and the Libertarian Party at large, for that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I, as a libertarian, kind of started my descent into libertarian idealism as a child. You know, my mom actually raised me on the story of how my grandfather refused to pay income taxes because he hated the way the government was using the money. The government did catch up to him, but it was still an inspiring story to hear as a kid. And my mom herself lived very much live and let live, love and let love, you know, as long as nobody's hurting people or taking their stuff, let people be, you know. And so I kind of got brought up in this mindset, and I never really fit politically in either of the two, you know, main political structures out there. And so as I kind of started aging and getting into like my early 20s, and I started exploring the alternative spectrum out there, I started, you know, hearing about libertarianism through channels like Ron Paul and stuff like that. I never really got involved, though. And then around 2016, I had recently met my wife, and we both were very passionate about the world events going on. We have children. And so we were like, you know, we need to do something. We need to get involved, right? But where do you get involved? And then I kind of went back to, you know, libertarianism, because I always knew it was the closest thing I aligned to politically. And so we started, you know, doing more research into it. And Gary Johnson was running at the time. So locally here in the county, we just started printing up little things that we made ourselves and like putting them on car windows, which we found out was illegal. And you know, and then we had
when has that stopped us?
Exactly, right? I mean, free men don't ask for permission.
Right.
So yeah, we did stuff like that. We bought a little bit of pamphlets from the main party, you know, and handed those out, and just really started conversations with our friends and family, started trying to wake people up. And, you know, obviously Trump ended up winning that election, and we didn't really go back into our shell per se, but we weren't as politically active as much as we were more community active. And we started really trying to wake people up around us hardcore, because obviously, you know, the state of the country was descending at a rate that we were seeing was just going out of control. Right. So, you know, by the time the next election cycle came back around here this last time, and Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen were announced as the presidential and vice presidential candidates, it really inspired us, especially, you know, Spike has a very strong message of activism and getting to work. And it really inspired us to get to work even more, but involved with the party. And so we started really pushing out a lot more messaging here in our local county. The state of Wisconsin, the LPWI, actually reached out to us, and they said, hey, we don't have a county affiliate. Would you guys like to start one? So we're like, sure. We actually have some people in the area that would also join. And so we started up the LPDC, the Libertarian Party of Door County. And throughout the entire summer, you know, actually a week after we became affiliates, the LPWI actually asked my wife and I to speak at one of Joe Jorgensen's rallies here in Wisconsin, which was just such an incredible honor, you know, right out of the gates, joining the party and getting, you know, the opportunity to do something like that. And then throughout the summer, we worked with her campaign a couple of times when they came here to Wisconsin. I ran her event in Madison. It was an amazing event. It actually ended up becoming kind of a protest because the city of Madison wouldn't allow us anything. They wouldn't give us any permits or anything. So we ended up parking her big blue bus at the Capitol building and just doing it right in the lawn with amplified sound. And it was beautiful. Nobody shut us down. So yeah, worked with them through the summer, worked really closely with the LPWI, tried my hardest to spread the message that liberty, was here in Wisconsin, and there were activists here that were getting to work and doing things. And then the election kind of came and went, but that fire, that momentum did not go away. It's still very much inside of us. And so we were continuing through the winter, and Matt Buffman, who was the previous chair, had reached out to me and it said, you're running for local office, because I'm running for Door County Board Supervisor. You're the chair of your local affiliate. You're probably one of, the loudest and one of the most active activists and volunteers in the party. I'm going to be stepping down and taking a different role in the Libertarian Party on a national scale. Would you be interested in taking over as chair? I don't know anybody else that's interested, nor, that has the drive to do it. Obviously I was blown away, because I had only technically officially been in the party for less than a year. I'd basically just been an activist before then, never really in the party. I felt this very, very deep drive inside of me to help bring my message of action and unity and inspiration to the state and to a lot of the members here. And I had already formed a lot of close relationships with a lot of them anyway, and I was already working with a lot of them. So it was very easy to, reach out to them and say, hey, I am actually thinking about stepping into this role. I developed a plan of action where I outlined all of the priorities that I could identify that I felt like the LPWI needed to put their resources, time, and energy, and how I could help, facilitate that to make sure it happened. I formed a bunch of, I wrote down a bunch of new committees and different positions I wanted to help empower a lot of the people at the ground level that wanted to get to work, but just needed goals and, to be able to get out there and do stuff. So I brought all that. The convention was a couple weeks ago in Eau Claire. We had some amazing speakers, seriously an incredible lineup of speakers and workshops that happened at the convention. I had the opportunity to meet so many amazing libertarians from across my state and really get to know them and get to understand that we all really do have the same common goal here for the state, which is liberty for everybody, regardless of your different varying spice, or your different brand of libertarianism that you subscribe to. And so that's really just the message I went into it when I gave my speech was, I don't really care what table you sit at, what caucus you sit at. I want to work with everybody. I want to, build the bridges so that we can actually get somewhere in this state. And I'm willing to sit down and listen to everybody, and let's get to work. And I ended up winning. It was a contested race, but I won 51-10. And from the day I got elected and until now, I've been hard at work. I've been, involved and engaged with a lot of different members in the party. I've been implementing the plan of action that I, came to the convention with and getting that all rolled out and getting that underway. We're planning a really awesome event for the end of this summer here in Wisconsin that we're hoping to kind of turn into an annual libertarian kind of getaway kind of thing. So it's been awesome. It's been really great to have this wave. And at the convention, one of the number one things I think that filled me with so much spirit was there was 100 people. It was actually one of the largest state conventions Wisconsin's had in its history. And over half of the people there were brand new, and they were ready to get to work, not just there to show up to vote, not just there, to cause trouble. They were ready to get involved. They wanted to actually figure out where they could be utilized the best. And it was so cool to see so many people just, right there and ready to get in the trenches with us. And it really just inspired me to work even harder, as the state chair.
That's fabulous. And it's great to see that kind of send off, because there is so much to work to be done.
Yeah.
Literally everywhere, at every level, every facet, every aspect. But again, that's the opportunity here at the Libertarian Party for folks who are liberty warriors, who are not content, no longer willing to just sit at a keyboard and opine, who actually want to get their hands dirty and actually take to the streets, as it were. This is really a new age for the movement and for the philosophy, and I applaud that. Obviously, activism is everything on every level. Every great political movement in the last couple of thousand years has found its roots ultimately in activism, by becoming not just someone who preaches to the community, but being part of the community in and of itself. There's so many aspects to a conversation like this. Sometimes I feel like they could run for hours, because there's so much to talk about. But to me, Wisconsin is a fascinating state. In one sense, it's part of, and I don't really like this word, but it's used very often, it's part of the quote unquote Rust Belt. But at the same time, its academics are at a very high level. And as a result, there are communities within your state that are so, well, let's just say relatively progressive, at the same time coexisting with those communities. Your politics are complicated.
Hmm.
You're just a few years ago, there was some guy named Walker, some governor of yours, that literally took over the state house, only to be, I think the technical term is hoisted by his own petard at some point later on.
Yep.
You've got a culture of corporate welfare there.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm talking about Foxconn and things like that.
Hmm.
So give us, if you will, a snapshot of the state you're operating under. What are the, who, quote unquote, and I love this term, who owns the state legislature? What is your governor like now? Both in terms of some of the big issues we'll talk about, as well as the issue, which is COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned education. So with a lot of things in Wisconsin, one of the number one issues is disparity, period. You have the situation where you have Madison and Milwaukee and Green Bay and, Eau Claire-ish area, the Northwest, and La Crosse and Prairie, like that area. You have some of these little pockets of the liberal kind of centers that put a lot of time and money into the education system and everything like that. But then you go out into the more rural areas of the state, and we're literally like 32nd in the nation when it comes to our education programs. So there's this massive disparity, and I think that it drives this like separation almost between society here, where you've got these like elitist, down in the Madison area that view people in the rural areas as kind of, redneck and backwoods. And it's not that way at all. I can tell you, I've been all across the state, and there's amazing human beings in every single corner of it. Even in those liberal meccas of Madison, I've met some beautiful human beings. But when it comes down to the dynamics, there's the reason why we're a purple state, the reason why we're a swing state every single election cycle is because of this split and this dynamic. And because it's this constant pull and tug, because technically it's almost evenly split when it comes to the population, but there's tons of gerrymandering that happens all across the area. And it really leads to a lot of screwed up districting in many of the cities and counties and districts and stuff. But when it comes to the politics here, it's a very interesting situation because, like you mentioned, we had Scott Walker, and Scott Walker was kind of beloved for a while. And then he really shot himself in the foot a lot towards the end, and then got himself ousted. And then Tony Evers, who's the current governor, had come in promising, what a lot of left-leaning, governors do. I'm going to legalize cannabis. I'm going to fix all the roads in the education system. I'm going to give you everything you want. He just, all these promises. And when he came in, all he focused on was the education system, because he was actually previously from the education system. He was a superintendent. And I think he actually rose to become like the superintendent of the entire state. And so like that's all he really focused on, and he dropped the ball a lot. Even when it comes to like race relations, we had Kenosha, the Kenosha incident happen. Actually, a couple different situations in Kenosha ended up happening. With the shooter that crossed the state lines and killed a couple people. Was it self-defense? Wasn't it? And then there was also the Blake shooting. And then just recently in Green Bay, we had another shooting. And there's a lot of, the same things that impact some of these bigger urban areas that are happening right here in this small 5.6 million person state of Wisconsin. And Tony Evers came in promising he was going to fix a lot of this, and he really hasn't. He's really just dropped the ball. He's been kind of like Sleepy Joe in a sense, where he plays the corporate lobby game. He actually is continuing Foxconn, like a lot of the same things Scott Walker was doing, just with a blue tinge. He has not done anything with cannabis. He has not done anything with the healthcare system or any of these things. When it comes to COVID, he was one of the most draconian governors in the entire country. The lockdown actually had to get challenged in our Supreme Court by the Republican legislature. The Republicans own the legislature, and so there's this constant civil war that ends up happening in the state house here, because you have the governor who runs, obviously, the executive branch, and then the Republicans who are over here running all the legislation. So it's just constant warfare. What is happening, though, what I'm assuming is happening in a lot of other states too, is the Republicans are fracturing massively. Our Republicans are split between the Trump camp and the GOP establishment camp. And you have some people that's actually really damaging the Republicans' chances of continuing to hold power in some of the areas of the state. Actually, here in our district, District 8, the current standing district senator, he actually is basically, he has no chance. Everybody hates him. He is one of them, like on Twitter, he gets eviscerated. Literally nobody loves this. Nobody likes this guy. Even the Republicans hate this guy.
And that's saying, that's wow. If you,
yes,
that's got to be saying something, right?
So you know, but my district I live in is classically a heavy conservative district. Like no liberal would have an opportunity to come in and win here. It's just not going to happen. So I'm working very closely with a gentleman. He's a local, he's a farmer, he's a vet, and he's a libertarian, and he's going to be running for Congress, you know, in 2022 coming up. And honestly, because of the situation with all of this fighting and the destruction, he might actually have an in here. He has name recognition, like everything. So, I mean, it's opening up certain opportunities in this state, I feel like, where, you know, there are heavy conservative areas that are kind of breaking from the GOP, and we can kind of sneak in there and, you know, and help them understand that we're actually the true party of freedom. And then the left is really feeling like their governor, their leaders dropping the ball and not caring about the things that they actually want to see done as well. And we can also message to them and help them understand, listen, we don't want the state to take care of these things, but we also do care about these things. So why don't we work towards voluntary solutions and work as a community to be able to take care of them instead of focusing on, you know, taking the state's power and mandating and controlling. Because, you know, during COVID, Evers, that's all he did. He just took full control. You know, the restrictions on limiting the, you know, how many people can go into bars and restaurants. He actually closed down bars and restaurants for a period of time entirely. You know, stores were entirely closed down. Mask mandates still up until just recently were still in full effect. And then finally were ended, even though some localities have obviously still decided. And then when it comes to, you know, vaccine push, it's just been, you know, an immense vaccine push everywhere you look, you know, across the state. And, you know, the talks about vaccine passports and stuff like that too haven't been off the table for Evers and stuff like that in the state. So that's where, you know, we have to, as libertarians, I think here, have a very strong radical message against the state. That's where the radicalism needs to come from, is against the state and what they're doing to the people, and help people understand that, you know, you have control over your own life, and, you know, no other human gets to control you just because they have some title in front of their name.
How important is it, particularly someone like yourself, who's the next generation of libertarian leadership, if you will, in your state, to dedicate those entries and exits and focuses and efforts and work at fighting the state as opposed to ourselves?
Oh, it's so important. It's like, that's all I actually want to focus on. I have absolutely no inclination or intentions to battle any other libertarians. I think that it's a complete counterproductive waste of time. You know, we've spent a long time sitting around tables debating bylaws, but we haven't spent a long time in the streets taking down the state that's oppressing our neighbors. And so I feel like, you know, this new spirit of action that's striking the libertarian movement is so healthy, and we're so ready for it as a party to just embrace that and allow it to transform us, because we need to start being the party of action. And I think we're starting to see that happen. Excellent.
You know, there are some overriding issues that I like to just get a quick sense of, so we can kind of bang through these, because I really want to talk about affiliates and some of the practices that you're going to be putting into place to build on the foundation of those that came before you.
Absolutely.
You know, you folks sort of became a national symbol for economic development and corporate welfare with Foxconn. Give us a brief explanation of what went wrong there, and, you know, how we can as take those lessons as libertarians and fight corporate welfare.
Well, yeah, Foxconn was essentially this backdoor deal that Scott Walker and his corporate cronies, and I'm sure it wasn't just like Scott Walker. I'm sure there was a lot of political class that were involved in this backdoor deal. But essentially, they sold out a lot of Wisconsin capital and financial prosperity to a Chinese company that promised to come in and spend all this money building these facilities and these manufacturing plants and putting all these people to work. And it was going to be this big, beautiful thing for Wisconsin. And we're now sitting here literally, I think it's like 5-6 years after the groundbreaking of this. Not one single facility has, I mean, I shouldn't say this. the facilities were built, but nowhere near to the capacity or the structure or the expectations that they were promised. They didn't employ nowhere, like even a fraction. I don't even think it was a quarter of the amount of people that were claimed that were supposed to be, employed by this project. And the overall financial impact has been absolutely nil to Wisconsin at all. And you see this so often here throughout the state, where, especially here in my area of Door County, actually, I say this all the time, Door County is primed and ready for libertarianism because of the corporatism that's actually infected this county so heavily. Door County is this beautiful, like, Cape Cod of the Midwest. We've got all these little mom and pop shops all just dotting everywhere. You could, if you, with a couple $1,000s, if you want to open up a mom and pop shop on the waterfront and, sell some wares you found from across the world or whatever, like, people do that. People sell all sorts of, it's amazing. It's all up and down this county. You have this beautiful spirit of free market economics, people paying each other under the table in cash to avoid taxes and all these, to avoid regulations and everything. People housing each other and giving, having migrants come in to work for them and housing them in lieu and, just making these deals. But you have these corporatists here, these big elitist power structures right here in this county that actually are spread out. Even they come from the rest of the state too, because Door County literally gets 2 million visitors in tourism a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for Wisconsin is a ton. So like there's a huge capital a huge market here to make capital. So these elite, interests come in here and they literally just buy everything up. They get into government. They make all these rules. Literally right now, they're trying to shut down Airbnbs because the big resorts up here, like the big elitist resorts that are owned by these multinational companies and stuff, like they don't want the competition. Yeah, and so they're trying to stop all these Airbnbs from flourishing because Airbnbs have been a huge market up here because you have a lot of family homes that have been sitting here for generations, but the kids don't really want to live in them anymore. They want to live somewhere else, but they don't necessarily want to sell their family home. So they put it up for an Airbnb and it basically pays for itself, maintains itself, but they get to keep the property. And so, you have these little pockets of this happening all across the state. I know La Crosse has its own issues where there used to be a lot of beautiful market of the beer market and automobiles and manufacturing. Milwaukee, same thing. Green Bay, same thing. And you just have right now, like you said, the Rust Belt, things are falling apart. You literally go to some of these cities and it's like ghost towns anymore. The malls are drying up. The businesses, the downtowns are basically shells of what they used to be. And all of that is because of corporatism and how much the state has come in and played favorites and willed the market to do what they want it to do instead of allowing the market to operate freely as it should. When you just allow people to transact openly and freely and you get the government out of the way, it allows for that market to just live in this beautiful harmony of balance. And if an idea no longer works, it no longer works and a better idea comes along. You can't force it to keep working until it literally leads to the destruction of your community. That's kind of what we're doing right now with the government, is we're just forcing it to work, and it's not anymore.
No, I absolutely. I mean, and I will just always say that fighting corporate welfare is a win-win-win for the ages, for libertarians, for a few reasons. Number one, we're often accused of being corporatists. We're getting, and I know if you check the Wisconsin Libertarian affiliates bank account, you'll see all that money from the big corporatists, right? All that fun,
so many dollars. Yeah.
Here in Rhode Island, we suffer the same thing. What will we do with all the money? But ultimately, by establishing a track record, fighting corporate welfare at even the hyperlocal level, eliminates that question forever. When people understand that we not want to rule over them, but we are stewards of their resources and have nothing but the community's best interest at heart, not some carpetbagger, we always talk about economic development. Who should economic development be for? The people who live there, or a carpetbagger who comes in and, levies or leeches off the local community, issues bonds backed by local communities, and ultimately develops property, develops product, and leaves. And never quite, it just never quite meets the expectations, if you will, of the of the consultants who were hired by those organizations. So it's just a win-win-win, because of course it's diametrically opposed to everything we stand for, because it is the free market that we live by. Education, you've got some of the finest state universities in the country, but at the same time, talk to us about local education, how that's working out, particularly in urban centers.
Yeah, the local education, like I had mentioned actually previously, is where it suffers the most. I think that's where, for one, the schools don't get that much, they don't get enough resources for the burden of students, the lack of teachers, and the actual distance, because a lot of these are in rural communities. So you actually have a school in an area of like 40 miles sometimes, and you have, 5 different cities, they're small, but they're still cities, towns, that are all sending their kids to one school. And when you have a dynamic like that, it leads to a poor educational experience because the children are distracted. They're not getting direct one-on-one pure education. There's so much that goes into that leads to the poor quality of education at the local system. And when it comes down to the way that the state runs the education system here, it's so top down, but so restrictive as well. So they'll say, well, we're going to trickle the money down to you, teacher, but we're also going to put all of these standards and these requirements that you have to meet on top of it, and then, be down your back the entire time. And, there was so I homeschool my children, but I also co-parent. I share my daughter with a previous relationship of mine. And so, when it came to schooling for her, at first, there was a bit of a tension because she wanted her to go to public school and I wanted to homeschool her. And so, we had to go through the courts, and the courts, obviously being ran by the state, decided that she would go to the state school. But either way, she went there for 2 years. And during that time period, I got a very good firsthand look at exactly, just all of these different areas where the teachers, I kind of felt bad for them in some degree because they're really, their hands are tied behind their backs. They're really doing the best they can with what they have. And, the school systems really expect a lot out of them, but at the same time, don't give them anything to work with. And I think what it leads to is a very poor educational experience for our children. I know my daughter really didn't like her teacher, and when I had parent teacher conferences and stuff, her teacher really didn't seem like her heart was in it, and that's probably not a personal discrediting to her. I just think it is the situation she was in was just not a good one. She just didn't feel supported. And even the way that she even talked about her classes, she personally purchased most of her tools and resources. She went out to the stores with her money and bought the things that she taught her kids with. And so at what point then are our tax dollars going to fund for education? How is that money getting to the kid if the kid isn't even, if the teacher has to go out and buy the resources to teach the kid? There's something messed up about that. And I think a lot of it comes down to also to these very top heavy administrative costs, especially here in Wisconsin. You've got this massive administrative bloat, all these excessive positions that don't need to be there. And it really just needs to get back down to the education. As libertarians, obviously, most libertarians agree with, we need to do away with the Department of Education on the federal level. We need to help the states feel more empowered to run their own education programs and also decentralize their education programs more to the local and county levels, because it's your local county school boards and the teachers and the parents and the kids that are going to ultimately be the ones that can know best how they want to be educated and what works best for that area. And this whole standardized education doesn't work anymore. It hasn't worked. We've reduced, the overall country has reduced in our education by so much over the last 50 to 75 years. It's sad. It's literally sad to see where we've come. And the only thing that's going to fix that is by allowing local people to have control over their own education again.
Is there any move towards vouchers? Is there any move towards charter schools? Ultimately, as libertarians, I think we all know that at least at a first stage, the money should just follow the kids to wherever they want to go. Is there any impetus for that in Wisconsin?
Yeah, actually, I will give credit to the fact that Wisconsin has some of the most relaxed homeschooling laws and rules. And when it comes to charters and private institutions, colloquial schools, and stuff like that, like there are a lot of alternatives you can go to. You don't have to go through the public school education system here, and you don't have to jump through a lot of loopholes to do it. For our homeschooling program, the only requirements are you have to at least have 850 hours of documented time in a class, like learning, and your curriculum, you have to be following a curriculum that is in some way, shape, or form progressively developing. So it has to get harder and more challenging as it goes along. Those are the two requirements that they have for homeschooling homeschooling parents here in the state. So, I mean, I'm all for that. I think that the more you can just get the state out of the way and allow the parents to decide, the better. Obviously, you're always going to have bad apples and lots of bunches, and you're going to have parents that don't take it seriously or don't handle it the right way. But those situations a lot of times get handled, by neighbors, relatives, friends, family. You don't need the state constantly bearing down on innocent, good parents because some parents possibly aren't doing it the right way. But yeah, vouchers, getting money. I think that's another thing too. If we're gonna tax, which I'm entirely against taxation, obviously, taxation is theft. But if the government's already going to be doing it, why isn't that money going directly to the kids? Why is it going through a bunch of different state departments and a bunch of administrative levels, and then maybe some pennies get down to the child eventually? Like, you're taking my money saying it's going to the education. It better go to the education then.
We alluded to earlier, and by the way, if you're just joining us, Tony Moen is the new state chair, of the great state of Wisconsin. He just ascended or descended, depending on your daily interpretation, to that level just a few short weeks ago. We're interviewing him as part of our Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight, where we really focus for about 45 minutes or so. Sometimes it runs long, a lot of stuff to cover on their affiliate. And throughout the year, we'll work our way through the states, and then we're going to get down into the sort of hyper local affiliates and hopefully soon the international ones as well. Tony, clearly, as you alluded to in the opening of the show, criminal justice systems, criminal justice reforms, racism, police reform, all of that is, for the worst reasons, alive and well in Wisconsin. Talk to us about Wisconsin. Is there something along the lines of a law enforcement Bill of Rights, LEOBR, as we call it here in Rhode Island, and what's being done based on just this rash of violence in a place that just most of us would never think to allude to, and of course that's Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, right now, there's very depressingly not a lot that's being done. And there is a lot of issues with the current criminal justice system, the way that cannabis especially, but decriminalization, of drugs in general is being handled. We have an opioid crisis that's just as bad as it is in most of the other Midwestern states right here in our state. And, obviously people joke about Wisconsin's alcoholism, but at the same time, it is also a crisis that goes kind of unchecked. And actually, it's the Tavern League of Wisconsin that's almost exclusively to blame for the fact that cannabis has not been legalized here in the state. They lobby constantly against it because they're afraid of it taking their business away from the alcoholics in the state. Which is just sad when you think about it, because, obviously one of the biggest components about cannabis is the medical side of things, and you're denying patients the right to be able to ingest a possible medical solution to ailments that take away so much from their life because you want to make more money getting them drunk. And that, like, I drink, I'm a responsible adult, I get it, but that just rubs me the wrong way when it comes to an organization putting their weight behind doing something like that. But, when it comes to the state itself, you have the police, which the police in Wisconsin, you have good police officers because there's good people in Wisconsin, very homey, good, will help you out, neighborly people. But the police here are very unaccountable, and they have a very tight brotherhood, much like you hear in places like Minnesota, and where even here in Door County, for instance, because we get so many tourists, they are hawks. Like, if you cross the middle line for a second, boom, you're pulled over. Oh, just got to check your car, just make sure you're not drinking. It's this constant, I need to look for every reason I possibly can to pull you over. And a lot of our urban areas, that leads to some very unfortunate situations, especially with people in disadvantaged communities. And, I think that when it comes to cannabis, one of the most depressing facts is that over 60% of the people in Wisconsin prisons are locked up for cannabis. And a vast majority, I think it's over 50%, are people of color. And, when people talk about institutional racism, a lot of people get knee-jerk reactions in some regards, but you really got to get down to the nitty-gritty of how these statistics play out and why they play out the way they do. And it's not a matter of, let's say that cop per se might have been racist or not, but there's, why is it that opioids are prescribed and yet they're used most frequently by white people. But cannabis is treated like heroin, and it is used most frequently by statistics with the, you know, people of color and Black communities. So, you know, like those are the areas where people have to start readjusting, or like licensing laws and stuff like that too, when it comes to institutional racism. But back on the criminal justice side of things, right now, we literally are on the verge of, I think it's like last time they polled, 75% of our state wants to decriminalize cannabis in some way, shape, or form, whether that be medical or recreational. And yet you still have all these people, 60% of the people in our prisons locked up for it. You know, and then what's going to happen once you legalize it? Are you just going to let all those people out? Are you going to expunge their records? Or are there still going to be people sitting in cages for something that other people are going to the store to buy? Right. You know, I actually saw a really great post the other day on Facebook that was like, how about before we talk about licensing rich people to sell cannabis, we let everybody out of jail who was doing it before. Right. You know, and that's one of the things that we really need to get down to. And, you know, there's a lot of extortion that happens with our state police here too, a lot of nonviolent crimes. You know, just petty, arbitrary things that don't need to be on the books, that we need to stop allowing the state to rob us, you know, for. Literally, in my hometown, to park on the street in the winter in front of my own house, I have to pay a $55 a year parking fee to park in front of my own house that I already pay to live in, you know, and like stuff like that. You know, that's arbitrary. Or the fact of like, you know, actually, I argue this all the time when it comes to speeding and stuff like that here. And like, we in the winter actually increase our speeds here in Door County. We increase all of our speeds in the wintertime because there isn't as much traffic.
Wow.
I'm like, how arbitrary is that? Why not just keep it that fast all year round then?
But by the way, on this show, we use the term arbitrary and capricious. And try that on a member of the law enforcement community, or in particular, say an attorney general's or a prosecutor's office, and watch, what's the term, hackles rise? There you go. The business of running a state party, particularly in a diverse, and when I mean diverse, I mean everything. You've got politically, socially, economically, culturally, geographically. Wisconsin's an awfully complicated place. As most states are, and each state's got its own nuances. Mm-hmm. How many affiliates do you have right now, and what's you know, how have you guys done affiliate development, and what are some of the things you're going to try this year to develop affiliates?
Well, the exact count I'm not sure of at the moment. There's some still floating out there. I think we're approaching around 20 or so. If I'm not mistaken. But right now, one of our main drives is affiliate building, because as I came in, that was one of the top priorities that I identified, was we need to build our membership and as thus our affiliates. And my vice chair, who actually is Jacob Vandenplas, the gentleman who's running for Congress that I'm helping as well, he got elected as vice chair, which is nice because we already work very closely together on his campaign. And so it was just very natural for us to come together. And yeah, and actually, too, one of the things is we have a couple of regional affiliates. I see you're pointing up the map there. We have a couple of regional affiliates that have numerous counties in them that need to be kind of broken up as well. But yeah, so right now, like about half of the state, if you were to split it up. But the problem is the Black ones are all the rural areas. Those are the ones that are the hardest ones to reach, right? The ones where they don't come to meetings, they don't go to events. They're anarchists, probably. They just want the government to leave them alone. And actually, if people who don't know Wisconsin geography, that whole upper Black area is called the Northwoods. It's a densely packed, wooded area, very sparse communities, people living out, you know, miles from their neighbors. So, you know, one of our main approaches actually was to break the state up, because when I came in, we had one affiliate coordinator, just one gentleman responsible for managing all of these affiliates. And he was doing the best job he could, but it wasn't enough. You know, we actually spent the last year with zero support from our state party at our local affiliate up there in Door County. We did it all ourselves. All of our events we ran ourselves. All the materials we handed out, we printed and purchased ourselves. We put up a billboard for Joe Jorgensen's campaign that we donated and paid for ourselves. Like, all of it was through us and our actions and activities, which I'm glad, you know, I want to inspire affiliates to do those sorts of things. But there needs to be some form of background structure and infrastructure behind the state party to be able to give the support where people don't have it. And, you know, in the rural areas especially, that's going to be needed. And so breaking the state up, I split it into 3 different regions: the Northwest, the Northeast, and the South Corridor. And then I gave each region its own affiliate coordinator to work with the affiliates in that region. And then I put the vice chair, Jake, because he's super passionate about affiliate building. I put him in charge as the chair of a committee with the regional coordinators so that they can all constantly network and communicate how best to support those affiliates and grow new ones. And then I personally, as the chair, plan to actually travel throughout my term to each affiliate at some point every month to be able to go to their meetings, meet with them, talk with them, hear their ideas, and also see how I can support them, in my chair role.
Right. The media, again, you've got Madison, you've got Eau Claire. I don't know. There's some football burg named Green Bay. We have some football team here called the Patriots. You may have heard of them.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm actually a long-suffering New York Football Giants, Jets fan, but
I grew up a Detroit Lions fan, so.
Well, right. We're in a contest for futility here. All right, I get that, but it's just a minute because by the way, you and I spoke offline about doing this. We talked about time. You see how quickly it flies by because there's just so much context, so much nuance. Talk to us about the media. Have you had a successful relationship with the media? Is it something you're planning to work on? How much noise, how much earned media, as the experts say, are you folks able to garner in the great state of Wisconsin?
I think so far it's been, I would call, fair-ish. So they don't come out in droves and they don't show up for everything. But when we're persistent enough, they do show up. We had a couple of media outlets that came to the Joe Jorgensen Oshkosh rally. We had a couple that showed up for the Madison event. And I think we had one that showed up for her Milwaukee event. We had one media outlet that came to our convention a couple weeks ago. So that was really neat. But actually, what's really cool is I actually created a position in our organization as a press secretary. And the person that I put in charge of that, she already is in a role where she works in media and has media contacts, right, and knows and understands how to build relationships with media. So, and I think that's one of the most crucial things. Like she even explained it, we can sit there and annoy them all day, and maybe every once in a while, like has been happening, they'll actually come out. But when we build relationships with them in a different way, and we actually meet them and we talk with them and we constantly just, keep them in mind and keep them, aware of what's happening, then when they get our notification, hey, we're doing an event, they're going to be like, oh, hey, it's the press secretary from the LPWI. Great. Like, let's go there. Let's cover that. So that's really what we've been kind of trying to focus on is, and actually I've been saying this ever since I've been running for chair, like Wisconsin has the opportunity. We are literally in the media's conversation every election cycle. We're one of the biggest swing states. We're super important every single time. They roll us out every single election. The last couple months, they highlight Wisconsin along with Ohio, and so why aren't we captivating that? Why isn't the LPWI having protests at our Capitol building? Why aren't we out there in the streets talking about ballot access issues? Why aren't we out there? Why hasn't our organization been at the forefront of those political discussions every single election cycle? And so that's what I really want to focus on is getting out there, getting us present, getting us in the media and saying, hey, we're here and we're not going away. So you might want to listen to us.
Absolutely. Last subject, if you will, of substance. And again, I wish we had a couple more hours, and I look forward at some point in time meeting you and continuing this conversation. Absolutely. And as we cycle through the affiliates, we're going to try and just keep rolling over, keeping updating people, keeping in touch with people, exchange ideas. It's the reason why LPTV exists. Is there are shows on every night now where libertarians can talk about whether it be the philosophy, the mechanics, the media target, 1,000 issues that we can talk about with each other and share best ideas. Get out the vote efforts is when you look at the big parties and the amount of money they're able to pour out into targeting, and particularly since in no place do they have to worry about ballot access and the information that comes with ballot access. Talk to us, what is your status in Wisconsin in terms of ballot access, and what are your thoughts about Go TV, as they say, get out the vote?
Yeah, I mean, right now we are secured for presidential ballot access for 2024, but that isn't always the case here. It really differs and varies based on how the candidates perform. This election cycle with Joe Jorgensen, we actually had to go out and collect signatures, which during COVID was quite a challenge, as a lot of people know. Right. We were out there in the streets too, up here in the northeast corner of the state, and I think we actually ended up pulling like maybe 50 between myself and my wife, and the few other volunteers we had, because of just how, limited the pool of people were out and about, and how unreceptive people were to opening their doors. So, I mean, I love the get out the vote push. I love, the renewed interest in especially the younger generations to get involved with politics. I think it's super critical, especially since there are so many new differing voices and political ideas that are surfacing right now. I think it's really important that we all participate, and, we help engage the young people and help them understand that their vote's important, and that voting for us isn't wasted. The older generations, that's been, the older generations of libertarians, that's been the number one thing that has been, I guess, the vulnerable spot that we've all had to feel is like, that's a wasted. And at this point, we can finally turn that conversation around and say, actually, do you see how much your vote for the other people have been wasted? Do you see, the experience that's led to this? And I think the younger people, the younger generations that are starting to vote are a lot more receptive to that.
Excellent. Is there a predominant race that you need to place well in order to maintain ballot access? How well do you have to do in which races?
It's the state races. So president, governor, just I've slipped in my mind, like district assembly, or not assembly, but general. Oh my gosh.
Officers.
Yes, the general officers basically of the states. Slipped in my mind, but essentially all of the top ones we have to get. I think it's over like 5% or something along those lines.
So it's a challenge.
It is.
We're limited here in Rhode Island to the governor or the presidential race getting over 5% in one of the bluest states in the nation. Yeah. And of course, there's all the other structural obstacles that are put in our place by our fine friends in the duopoly. Before we sort of get into our final stage, which we lovingly refer to on our shows here as shameless self-promotion, which we encourage at all costs. Do you have any events coming up that folks need to know about across the country? You just had your convention. One of the aspects of this show that we're going to start to emphasize is affiliates letting us know, even if they're not on the air that night, as to what events are coming up that we can promote, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, it hasn't been completely officially announced and put out there and promoted yet, but it will be in the next couple of weeks. At the end of summer, August 13th through the 15th, the LPWI will be hosting an event up here in Door County. We're going to be getting some great libertarian speakers and guests up here. There's going to be some fundraising and live music, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a community building event. We're going to be trying to get out new membership, new fundraising, and just new interest in the party, while also supporting Jake's congressional run, because it's actually going to be on his farm at his property.
Nice.
So it's going to be, kind of helping the whole thing kick off, because starting in December is when we're going to start collecting signatures for him. He does need to collect signatures to get on the ballot. And so do I, and so does my wife, who's running for city council. So in December, we're also going to be doing a bunch of events around the state for those who are running and need signatures. We're going to be doing events to help get signatures for them as well. But yes, August 13th through the 15th, mark your calendars. It's going to be awesome. If you can get there, it's going to be worth it. There's going to be camping if you need a place to stay, and that's going to be a great time.
Excellent. So again, shameless self-promotion. Tell us where folks, whether they're traveling to Wisconsin or they're in Wisconsin, where can folks find out about candidates, the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin, upcoming events, all the good stuff? Lay it on us.
Absolutely. So lpwi.org, for those of you who aren't on social media, would be one of the best places that you can go to. Otherwise, you can also hit up our social media. We are on Facebook. There is a Twitter that we're actually going to be starting up here soon for the LPWI. We're also out there on YouTube and other areas that you can find to watch our videos and stuff like that. And you can go to Dorco for Liberty as well. That's one of the pages that I started up for our local affiliate. I also run a website that I track all of the activism and the candidates and the events that are happening throughout the local areas, as it says there, dorcoforliberty.org. Thank you very much. As far as social media goes, I do run a podcast, Life and Liberty podcast. It's twice a week. Actually, tonight, right after this, I'm going to be interviewing my wife for her city council run. And this Friday, we'll be talking with Tyler Smith, who many people know out there in the libertarian world. I also am I formed the Young Radicals for Liberty, an organization that I hope to kind of engage more of the younger generation that are more radically leaning, more radically operated, but help teach them liberty and how to do it respectfully and rationally. And then I also run the Libertarian Cannabis Collective. because I am a huge proponent for cannabis reform. I am a medical cannabis user myself, and I have been well educated on the benefits of cannabis in many different ways. And I want to help bring the world of libertarianism and cannabis together, because I don't think there's a lot of, coerciveness between those worlds. And so, yeah, those are some of the projects I've been working on. I'm also part of Free Speech Media. It's a network of amazing podcasters and content creators. We're actually going to be at the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania's event this weekend. We're going to be getting the premier access to live stream and broadcast it. And then I personally, because I'm a cinematographer, I'll be putting together the documentary that we're going to be putting out, so that everybody sees firsthand a non-biased look at exactly what happens at what's potentially going to be a very interesting event this weekend.
Well, then actually it's interesting because we will have a chance to meet then.
Well, I'm not personally going to be there, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's well, I'll get to that in a second. We'll talk about this week's events coming up on LPTV. But listen, congratulations.
Thank you.
It sounds, first of all, on ascending to the role of state chair. It sounds like you've got a marvelous history there to build on, to bring to that next level. It's the right place, the right time, the right people. You've got your hands on some of the most important issues in America that are taking place right in your backyard. So the opportunity to provide real impact, if you will, to provide focus on issues that desperately need focus is astonishing. So, of course, as fellow libertarians from around the nation, we wish you nothing but luck. We hope you'll use this venue as a way to communicate any events that you're having, any particularly special elections, spotlights on campaigns. The purpose of this network is to bring affiliates together via candidates and the affiliate leaders themselves, so that instead of being a loose affiliation of 50 state parties and a handful of DC and international affiliates, that we become more inclusive, closer together. We learn from each other and we support each other. And Absolutely. It sounds like you guys are off to a great start on that. So thank you so much. Tony Moen, yes. He is the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin. A couple of quick notes. We will be on the road this week on May 17th. First of all, the affiliate show in-house, Libertarian Spotlight, Texas Libertarian Chair Whitney Billieu will be joining us next Monday night. But in a very special version of the show, we're going to be in Pennsylvania ourselves, and we're going to be interviewing on the evening of May 14th. That's next Friday. This Friday, I should say, coming up. Liz Turlier, she's running for the United States Congress. There will be a fundraiser at Bigham Tavern, which is a stone's throw, if you will, from the convention headquarters itself. It's a no-cover event. They are, of course, going to pass the hat to benefit Liz and her campaign. She's off to a marvelous start. She has done yeoman's work getting petitions in state that has made, like every other state seemingly, access to the ballot more challenging than ever. It's become sort of a decathlon every year, every 2 years, depending on the office. Sort of a challenge course, a torture course, in order. And yet somehow, people from Wisconsin, people from Pennsylvania, people from all over this nation manage to overcome, adapt, and improvise and get on the ballot. Liberty will not be quieted. So we'll be on the road Friday night in beautiful Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Folks, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. We are, of course, the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight. As always, a production of the Libertarian Party Affiliate Support Committee. Valerie Sarwak serving as chair. And, of course, the Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman serving as chair. I want to thank John Gapso every week, twice a week, after a full and rewarding day at his employment. He comes here and mans the big board. He's the one who brings you the fun graphics and the infotainment aspect, if you will, to our guest presentation. Folks, as every week we say, be safe, be prosperous, be free. Good night.